Hello everyone, I'm Dr. Sridhar, Associate Professor from Maxillofacial Surgery. We are going to learn fracture and its management. Very importantly, quite oftenly asked question for third year undergraduates is fracture of mandible. So we are going to deal with this section in two parts. In part 1, in general, what is fracture, how it is managed, we'll learn along with its healing. In part 2, we'll come down to very specific to what are fractures of mandible. A simple definition for a fracture is: a fracture is break or disruption in continuity of the bone. Whatever normal alignment or normal architecture of the bone is disturbed due to various etiological factors. The etiological factors being trauma. Trauma is the biggest causative factor, especially road traffic accident. Majority of the fractures occur due to road traffic accidents, especially in developing countries like India. Apart from that, you can have interpersonal violence, you can have contact sports, or you can have stress fractures wherein especially they occur in small bones, sometimes due to overweight of the patient, and sudden fall or a slip of the patient can lead to this. Apart from these two reasons, major reasons, fractures can also occur due to osteomyelitis, osteoporosis, or osteopetrosis, infections or metabolic bone diseases which occur. If you have long-term vitamin D deficiency, the porosity or mineralization of the bone is affected, and these pathological conditions can lead to fractures of bone. The predisposing factors can be a neoplasm or a cancer or a tumor which is happening, a cyst which can occur, which can occupy large spaces, especially in mandible, where you have dentaris cyst or odontogenic keratocyst or a huge periapical cyst or unicystic ameloblastoma or ameloblastomas. All these things can occupy the space and then they can lead to pathological fractures. You can have protein malnutrition, or you can be battered syndrome, battered child syndrome, wherein a child is repeatedly abused by the parents or anybody at home. Multiple fractures are seen. How do you classify fractures? Classification of mandibular fractures is different. In general, how do you classify fractures is according to the type, whether it is exposed to outside environment. That means you got a fracture of the bone, but it is not visible to the naked eye. You got a fracture of the bone and you can see that the injury, you can see the bone directly, or if you feel that the wound is exposed, then it is called comminuted fracture. If it is inside, then it is called non-comminuted fracture. And based on the anatomy of the bone involved, you can again classify. You got broadly in general classification. What are the types of fracture? You have an avulsion fracture. See, this arrow indicates an attachment of the ligament to a particular bone. Whenever there are huge forces which are involved, due to pulling of this ligament, a part of the bone can be fractured. So this is called avulsion fracture, which can occur due to pull of the muscle or the ligament. Comminuted fracture. It is a fracture with more than two fragments. The smaller fragments will appear to be floating. Multiple fractures are involved. More than one or two fragments. If you have multiple fractures, it is called as comminuted fracture. You can have a displaced fracture. It involves one part of the fracture overriding another. So or they can be separated, or they can be far away from each other. So this is called displaced fracture. You can have a particular type of fracture called green stick fracture, which can occur in children. It's an incomplete fracture. One side of the cortex is fractured, the other cortex is bent. It is not complete fracture. So just imagine you take a stick or a twig from a tree and try to break it, which is fresh one, not a dry stick. Try to break the amount of force you give will yield only one side of the cortex, or one part of the bone will yield, it will break down, the other part will be intact. So this kind of bent fracture or a part incomplete fracture is called green stick fracture. Usually it is seen in children. Impacted fracture, wherein one part of the bone is driven into the another part of the bone. That's when you call it as impacted. A part, though they are fractured, one part of the bone is driven into another part of bone is called impacted fracture. You can have intra-articular fractures, especially these are seen in joints like knee joint, elbow joint, or tarsal joint, flanges, fingers or toes. These things happen. It is a fracture which extends into the articulating surface, wherein the movement is possible. A longitudinal fracture, again a part of incomplete fracture, wherein the fracture line runs along the long axis of bone. These are usually seen in tibia, fibula, radius, ulna, long bones, especially the limbs, legs and hands. You tend to see this kind of fracture. And you can have an oblique fracture. The line of fracture will extend from one side to another. You can have a transverse fracture. You can have a spiral fracture. Spiral fracture is the fracture line extends like a ring, like a spiral. Oblique fracture, wherein it starts at one end and then ends at another end. Transverse is exactly horizontal. So spiral fracture is a fracture which in line of the fracture line extends in a spiral direction along the bone. So that is how it occurs. It starts at one place, and it swirls around like a spiral. So this usually occurs when long bones are rotated. The force is so violent that the fracture is bone is rotated or twisted. That's usually you notice this in long bones, especially like in femur. A transverse fracture is exactly horizontal or perpendicular to the longitude of the axis. If you have along the line of the longitude of the axis of bone, it is called longitudinal fracture. If you have at a right angle or perpendicular to the long axis of the bone, then it is called transverse fracture. Pathological fracture, as we said, a space occupying lesion, whatever might be the pathology, it will tend to lead to fracture of the bone, tumors, cysts, or otherwise you need to have an infection like osteomyelitis, or you need to have a vitamin D deficiency, osteoporosis, or osteopetrosis. All these factors will cause a pathological fracture. Stress fracture, especially seen in legs, ankle, or in elbows or in hands. It's a fracture that occurs in normal or abnormal bone that is subjected to repeated stress, especially jogging, running. So constant stress is seen. This will lead to a stress fracture. Depression fracture, usually cranial vault. You see these kind of fractures wherein there is a lot of amount of force which is absorbed. So the structure of the cranial vault is that you have an outer cortex and you have an inner cortex. usually an outer cortex will fracture and then it will tend to be like a depression, it is gone inside, but inside the inner cortex may or may not be completely fractured, so this gives an appearance of external depression. And you have a hairline fractures when the force or the stress is not good enough to cause a complete fracture, or it is just a small force wherein the body is able to absorb, but some amount of pressure has gone inside the bone and this has caused a hairline fracture. Quite often hairline fractures will not require any kind of serious management. You can just leave it, you can just immobilize it, not use the bone which has been affected. So these are all the types of fractures what you can see: an avulsion fracture, a comminuted fracture, comminution, multiple bone pieces displaced which is not in near with the other part of the bone. A green stick fractures, only one part of the cortex is fractured. In impacted, one fracture is driven into the another fracture. Intra-articular, there is a fracture extending into the articulating surface wherever the joint movements are there. So inter-articular fractures are seen only in joints. A longitudinal fracture, a fracture which runs across the long axis of the bone. An oblique fracture, in oblique direction in according to the long axis of the bone. And you have a spiral fracture, especially whenever there is a twisting of the bone which can occur. And you can have a transverse fracture, pathological fracture, and stress fractures. Again, the fractures can be an open fracture or a closed fracture. The ones what you are seeing is a closed wound, so the injury is not seen exterior. What you can notice is a darkening of the skin due to hematoma, or you can see a joint fracture again filled with hematoma, inflammatory edema, but you will never see the bone into the external environment. So if you see the bone into the external environment and the bleeding has occurred outside, then this is called a open wound or a open fracture. These two are examples for a closed wound. Now, pathophysiology. What happens if there is a fracture? A fracture tends to lead to disruption of the muscles attached to the bone. These muscles undergo spasm and they pull the fracture fragments out of position. So the displacement of the fracture depends on the attachment and direction of the force of the muscle. This is very vital, especially in mandibular scenario. Whether you can call this as a displaced fracture or undisplaced fracture will depend where exactly the fracture line and which muscle is stronger in that region to pull it away. And whenever there is an injury to the bone, initially there will be vasodilatation and all the inflammatory features will exist there. You might have learned in second year general pathology. All the inflammatory signs will be seen, and due to the lot of inflammatory reaction, you will see that leukocytosis is happening, and this bleeding and brought about of all the leukocytes into the region of the injury. This serves as the initial step of the bone healing. So fracture healing can occur in various stages. The first stage being hematoma. Whenever there is an injury, you tend to see that within 72 hours there will be hematoma which is present in and around the fracture. This is brought about by bleeding. From day 2 to day 14 there will be granulation tissue formation due to various leukocytes like macrophages or whatever they are coming. Active phagocytosis will occur, and whatever necrosis or a bone necrosis has happened, this will be converted into granulation tissue. The granulation tissue is very vital for formation of pre-bone or a initial bone formation that is called osteoid. The osteoid will form within 3 to 14 days. Then there will be callus formation. Once the osteoid is being deposited with minerals, this is called callus formation. Whenever there is a callus formation, that is when you see that in the X-ray. That is the first indication. Callus formation is the first indication on an X-ray. Wherever there is mineralization has occurred, the mineralization will be shown on the X-ray. Ossification, this will take after 3 weeks. So initial bone healing requires 3 weeks, and a further 3 weeks will take for ossification. Ossification will occur somewhere between 3 to as long as 6 months, depends on the size of the bone, site of the fracture, everything is involved. Consolidation, as the callus continues to develop, the distance between bone fragments diminishes, and then there will be fusing. This is consolidation, wherein the bone becomes strong or consolidated so that it doesn't further yield. Remodeling take place. Remodeling, there can be excess formation of the bone, there can be under formation of the bone. Whatever excess formation of the bone is being remodeled by osteoclasts, and then they try to get into the shape and size of the pre-injury stage. So this might take, remodeling might take 1 year to 1.5 years following the injury. So these are the various stages of the fracture. So initial hematoma formation, then callus formation, granulation tissue formation, callus formation, mineralization, and then at a later stage remodeling of the bone. What will be the clinical manifestations of fracture? The first and foremost being pain. Because the bone is attached with muscles, and that particular limb or organ or area of anatomical area of part of the body, we will not be able to move it around. So there will be limited or complete loss of function. There can be aesthetically a deformity. If you have a fracture in zygoma, if you have a fracture in vault, there can be a deformity, alter in the shape and size. There can be shortening, especially the limbs, whenever you have a fracture and one end is driven into the other end. So there can be a shortening of the limb. There can be crepitus movement, rocking sound, because the rubbing of two ragged borders of the bone will create that crepitus. There can be swelling, there can be discoloration, so rubor, calor, dolor, all the parts of inflammation will happen. There can be muscle spasm because the muscle might have contracted during the violent force, and obviously pain and tenderness will be there. Right from simple plain X-ray to bone scan, computer tomograms, advanced computer tomograms, MRIs. MRIs usually will give the soft tissue damage. CT scans will give you the bone damage, and plain X-rays will determine the displacement, where exactly it is located, what kind of fracture it is. So X-rays, plain films are taken according to region specific. Apart from that, routine blood picture is taken so that to check any inflammatory conditions are there or any pre-existing conditions are there. How will you manage a treatment? You have 3 phases in fracture management. This is in general what we are talking, not in particular to mandible. We'll come to fractures of mandible in part 2. An emergency care, initially you need to support the bone, you need to stop the bleeding. So that is all emergency care. Then phase 2 you have a definitive care, and phase 3 you need to give rehabilitation to the site. In emergency management, you just see the pictures. Wherever the fracture will be, you try to not to move the fracture, so you try to immobilize the fracture or the organ or the limb by tying a splint. Most of the splintings you can do, especially if they are closed fractures meaning where the injury is not exposed to the outside. Whatever is available, even if it a normal scale, a flat scale, a cardboard, or a stick, a grandfather's stick, anything can be used to splint, and just tie around a normal cloth also until you shift the patient to the proper orthopedic surgeon or a general surgeon. An open fracture, the first and foremost concern is bleeding, not the splinting. So you know that it is fractured, you know that the bone is disturbed, and the most important thing is that it should not bleed and it should not get contaminated. So initially if you have a running water, you just keep it, the injury wound underneath the running water, so that whatever localized contaminants are there, they are just thrown away. Otherwise there will be high chances of gangrene formation due to contamination of the wound. So you clean the wound and then try to stop the bleeding by applying a tight bandage around the wound. So don't bother about the fracture reduction or fracture, what will happen to the bone if I tie something like that. The initial thing is to stop the bleeding. So once you do this, the patient might be shifted to accident and emergency department. That is the first department in hospital where everything is written in red. You might be seeing in a huge hospital, even in our college you might have seen that there is something called accident and emergency department. Whenever somebody is injured, they are going to take you there, and the emergency physicians will recognize that during this process of shifting, if at all you call an ambulance, there will be ER physicians or ER technicians inside the ambulance who will try to use a very specific plank, a board. Especially you have a cervical fracture or a neck fracture, they'll try to immobilize the neck. If you have a pelvic fracture, they will try to immobilize the pelvis. So there are various kinds of planks and splints which are available for the emergency professionals who will try to manage that. So these are all simple bandages what you see for a wrist fracture, and this is definitely a mechanized board. This is again, it is available in most of the ambulances where they try to fit in the leg or a hand. Now you have an open fracture. Initial management will be first and foremost give a tetanus shot after stopping the bleeding, after taking care of the wound. You try to give a tetanus shot so that tetanus will not set in, and then try to start a broad spectrum antibiotic, whatever it might be, so that the wound is not infected. You need not write acefalexin or something, but it should be a broad spectrum antibiotic which takes care of the bacteria which have penetrated inside. So this is initial management, wound management, splint management, or antibiotics. Once the patient is taken to accident emergency, according to the speciality, there will be definitive assessment based on the radiological investigations what they have taken, and then they'll call the neurosurgeon or the general surgeon or the orthopedic surgeon. Most of the times it will be orthopedic surgeon who will be called to manage the limb fractures. So the orthopedic surgeon will take an assessment with the help of radiographs and then try to plan the treatment. So you have a treatment by functional use, like you have a clavicle fracture, you have a rib fracture, you have a scapular fracture. They may not exactly require a reduction because very difficult for us to reduce, and since they don't actually, they support the body frame, they don't actually involve in a function, so, or a minimal function or assist the function, they will not be reduced but they will be immobilized. Immobilized means immobile, don't want to move them. So treatment by immobilization, fractures without significant displacement, like you have a fracture but it is not displaced, it is just something like a hairline fracture which is not displaced, so you tend to go for just immobilization. A fracture which requires reduction, definitively the fracture bones are displaced, so you want to bring them back to normal alignment and then going for immobilization, or and then going for fixation. These are two kinds of things. So first we'll understand what is a reduction. A reduction can be closed reduction, an open reduction, or a continuous traction. What do you mean by closed reduction? The injury is inside. The injury you cannot see outside. The fracture bones or fracture site cannot be seen, except that the patient will feel pain or tenderness or palpation, or you have noticed a redness or erythema. Within 72 hours you might see a hematoma or a swelling in that region. So these sorts of closed injuries, which are not open to outside environment, are usually tried to reduced with manipulation by the orthopedic surgeon. So they use bimanual manipulation, 2 hands or 2 personal, at times 4 hands are also are used. So they have a techniques, very specific techniques. So they will see in the X-ray, they'll get a visualization. So okay, this is how it has been displaced, let me reduce like this. So this is done by a very skilled orthopedic surgeon who might go in for a closed reduction. A closed reduction involves non-surgical manual realignment of the bone fragments to the best possible anatomic position. We cannot guarantee that it will be exactly anatomic position, but to the best possible anatomic position, closed reduction will be done. So this can be done under local anesthesia or general anesthesia. Once you reduce the fracture, you tend to cast that area. So plaster of Paris, most commonly you might have seen patients walking around in the hospital setup with a slab for a leg or for a hand. So this is called a splint. In normal words it can be called as a slab, but usually it is called casting or splinting. So this is used to immobilize. Once you have an open reduction where the injury is open already, this is brought about only by exposure of the bone side. You need to give an incision, you try to separate the muscles, you try to separate the periosteum, expose the bone, and then try to reduce this bone. Once you reduce this bone, you don't want the bone fragments again to get displaced. You tend to place a internal fixation. So that's called wire fixation. You can use a stainless steel wire to fix it. You can use pins, you can use screws, you can use plates. We'll see all those pictures, then only you will understand that. So this will bring about the maximum possible or best possible anatomical reduction. So when to do a fracture open reduction? Wherever closed reduction is not possible. So wherever multiple injuries or wherever the bone is exposed to the outside, so this is when you try to go in for internal fixation, exposure and internal fixation. So example for a screw fixation, a screw similar like what you see normally with a carpenter screw. Design is same, that's passed across the bone, or a wire, especially in the fingers, tarsal, metatarsals. There is something called K wire, it's called Kirschner wire. So that is passed through the inside the bone. So pins, screws, plates. There is a plate which supports outside and multiple screws are placed. So they are called DCP plates, EDCP plates, various kinds of plates are there. Then you can have a long pins which are present again. They are called intermedullary pins or nails, especially suitable for long bones. You can see that's a long pin which is passing through the medullary part of the bone, which is again fixed or stabilized with smaller pins. Or you can have tension bands wherein you don't want the fracture to be displaced. So there is a tension band principle wherein you apply that. See, these are examples for plates, DCP. These are all used for mandible. We'll just go through in our part 2 section. So this is how an open reduction is going to take place, exposed injury site, and then I'm going to close it. This is picture 1 depicts the fracture which is displaced. You can see the displacement of the bone. They are anatomically disfigured. They are reduced to normal anatomic position and then they are fixed with a plate and screw. So this is the fracture management. Either you can do it closed reduction, or you can do it an open reduction and internal fixation. You can have an open reduction and external fixation. You can have closed reduction and external fixation. This is what is external fixation, wherein instead of plate inside, you have an external apparatus with rods and pins, which is used for external fixation. The disadvantage with external fixation is that you cannot use it in all the anatomical regions, especially mandible or maxilla. These are all aesthetic zones. You cannot have a cage or you cannot have external fixator, but usually it is used for long bones, especially tibia, fibula and all. So this is how an external fixate looks like. The fixation will take place with a rigid bar which is outside the bone, which is not inside the bone or on the bone. It is outside the bone, and with the help of pins, they get tracked, and how exactly the shape and size of the bar will be there, accordingly these bony fragments will be pulled. So you have an open reduction with external fixation. You can have open reduction with internal fixation. You can have just a closed reduction with immobilization. You can have a closed reduction with external fixation. So this is plate and screw. Because they are long bones and lot of stress is involved, the smaller plates cannot bear the stresses, and then they will fracture. They tend to fracture. Especially, that is why I said this is done in femur, tibia, fibula. So an external fixator will benefit, especially if it is comminuted fracture also. Multiple segments of the femur is fractured. So you can use external fixation. Continuous traction, there is another type of fracture reduction, wherein you apply external force and then try to pull the bony fragments. So I'll just show the pictures so that you can understand this. This is a continuous traction. Again, traction can be skin traction or skeletal traction. So with the help of weights, commonly you might have seen this in movies or pictures or somewhere, wherein you have an impacted, means one fracture end is driven into another fracture end. It is just not immediately possible for us to remove, because lot of musculature, lot of periosteum strength is there in and around. You have a very badly displaced fracture, so they try to put a slab, and then for the external skin they try to put a weight which will continuously track that. Or you can have a skeletal traction, wherein you put a screw inside the displaced fragment. Along with the to the screw is fixed into the bone, and to the screw an external traction device is being set up. An external traction device is set up. So this is called skeletal fracture. So you can have a skin traction, you can have a skeletal traction. Both the methods will try to bring about a fractures, especially an impacted fracture or a very badly displaced fracture, into normal alignment. So, or you can have a strapping or splinting, especially with single fractures when they occur. You try to strap that with the adjacent bone. So this is again strapping. This is another method, especially with the clavicle, or you have a shoulder dislocation. They'll try to put in a sling and then immobilize the region. You can have a cast which is immobilized, plaster of Paris, or nowadays advanced materials like polymers or acrylics have come. This is a complete cast, especially chest fractures are there, rib fractures are there. These are all the splint. So with this we'll end initial introduction to the fractures. In the next part we'll take up with very specific fractures of mandible.